Good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Jean Cadet from Virtual BS. Last week, at the end of last week's live broadcast, I made an announcement that for the next 4 Thursdays, beginning tonight, August 13th, August 20th, August 27th, and September 3rd, that I was going to do something that is reminiscent of my childhood experience. You see, in my generation growing up, that we knew that TV studios would always play their new episodes from September all the way to like the end of May, beginning of June. And then during the summer, they would rerun those episodes. Well, that's what I'm going to do for the next 4 Thursdays. I am going to rerun or replay from our archives 4 segments, 4 teachings that was very important that people responded positively towards them, that I'm going to rerun those. So I pray that it's a blessing to you and that you would be encouraged, and I will be back live again on September 10th. So let me pray. Father, bless everyone who sees these recordings and let them draw closer to you. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you, and I will see you live on September 10th. What's up, America? What's up, world? This is Jean Cadet calling out on you right now, saying hello. I'm glad you could join us. Welcome to the launching of Virtual Bible Study, which I will commonly refer it to as Virtual BS, because there's a lot of BS going on out there in the world, but here I want to fertilize your heart with truth and love and give you what the Bible has to say so that we can live our lives much better. Again, my name is Dr. Jean Cadet, and I should give you some information about myself. So I'm born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, to Haitian immigrants. My parents, both from Haiti, and kind of grew up in the Catholic Church for many, many years. But I really didn't know the Lord. Then eventually I ended up at the University of Miami, where I picked up my bachelor's degree in religion. Afterwards, I gave my life to Christ about 5 months after my graduation, and that's when I felt called to go back to seminary. So I ended up heading out west, picking up my Master's of Divinity from Trinity Evangelical Divinity School outside the Chicago area, and I still wasn't finished. I ended up from there at Princeton Theological Seminary right here in Princeton, New Jersey, and picked up my Master's of Theology. And finally, to my surprise, in the midst of the COVID startup, I picked up my Doctor of Ministry degree from Nyack College Alliance Theological Seminary in New York City. Now, does that make me qualified to teach this? Probably not. Maybe I'm not qualified, but I do know certain things, and I do know some things, and I just want to share it with all of you. But I do need to mention some housekeeping matters. If you really appreciate this broadcast, I really need you to subscribe to it towards the end. So keep that in mind. Also, the format. My goal is to teach it on a particular topic for 2 to 3 sessions every Thursday night at 7 p.m. for 1 hour. I want to teach for about 45 minutes. And after 45 minutes, you can hit me up with some questions on the chat room. I may not be able to get all of your questions answered, but send it and I'll pick it out. Also, I want you to know that you can reach me on my new email address, all small caps, Dr. Dr. period, Jean Cadet, period, virtual BS at gmail.com. I'll repeat it again. So all small caps, Dr. period, Jean Cadet, period, virtual BS at gmail.com. You can send your questions there as well. Now, every 2 to 3 sessions, I'm going to switch topics. There are certain exciting topics that I do want to cover going forward, but beginning tonight, we're going back to basics. We're going to talk about basic fundamental principles about the Bible. Afterwards, I'm going to talk about stuff like Christian ethics. I'm going to talk about church and race. I'm going to talk about comparative religion, the major religions in the world, understanding cults. There's going to be a series of messages that I will give you a warning ahead of time what's coming up. But tonight, again, is basic Bible stuff. because I remember Vince Lombardi, who was the famous NFL head coach for the Green Bay Packers. He had a thing about going back to fundamentals. He strongly believed the more you really insert or reassert fundamentals in a player's life, it becomes second nature. So he didn't care how successful his team was. He didn't care if they were really that bad, but he always started the season by saying, let's get back to basics. So today we're going to do that. We're going to get back to the basics regarding the Bible. But first, I do need to remind all of you, or tell you a story really, that I am dedicating tonight's session to my aunt, Tante Denise. Now, most of you may know her, you're probably familiar, I should say Aunt Denise, but coming from a French background, it's Tante Denise. She lived right around the corner from my mom's house. When Tante Denise heard that I was off to seminary to become a minister, she told my mom how excited she was for me. And my mom told me, and my mom said, before you head out to seminary, go around the corner and see Tante Denise because she really is excited about you beginning ministry. So I went around the corner, knocked on the door. She opened the door. She was so happy to see me. She hugged me and thanked me for coming. And we sat there, her and her husband, for a while talking. And at the end of the conversation, she said, is there any way you could get me a French Bible? Because I lost mine. I can't find it anywhere in the house. I've always had one. I can't, I don't know where it is. I said to her, no problem. And this was about a week before I was supposed to fly out to the Midwest. So the next few days, I went down to the American Bible Society in the city. And by the way, if you know anything about the American Bible Society, they got Bibles in every language. So I went there, picked out a nice French Bible. I dedicated it to her. And the day before I was supposed to fly off to the Midwest to begin my seminary education, I went around the corner, knocked on her door. She was glad to see me. I handed it to her. She was ecstatic. And she opened it and saw the dedication that I had made in the inside cover of the Bible. And she was just stunned by my gift to her. But then afterwards, she said something to me that stuck with me to this very day. Her next statement to me was, now if only I had somebody to teach me what it says. I was stunned because all of my life, I've known her and her husband to go to church all the time. They went to church multiple times during the week. And here's this 75-year-old woman at that time telling me she didn't know anything about the Bible. So that stunned me to a point that I realized I got to get into teaching, and that's why I went off to get all of my degrees. And this is my opportunity, virtual Bible study, to teach you stuff that I've learned over the years. So I'm dedicating this to Tante Denise. I wish you were alive because you would understand the Bible in 1 or 2 sessions. So biblical illiteracy is a problem in America. Actually, it's a problem in the whole world. George Gallup and his other researcher, Jim Castelli, wrote this statement about 6 years ago. He said, America reveres the Bible, but by and large, they don't read it. And therefore, because they don't read it, we have a nation of biblical illiterates. That's what he said. And I was like, wow. So they did a research, the Barna Group as well, about 6 years ago, and they came up with some startling statistics. Less than 50% of Americans know the names of the 4 Gospels. Think about that. About 60% of Americans cannot name at least 5 Ten Commandments. That's why we're breaking all these commandments, because you don't know what the commandments are. But 60%. 12%, believe it or not, of Americans believe that Joan of Arc was married to Noah. 12%. 6 years ago, 50% of high school seniors who graduated really believed Sodom and Gomorrah were a married couple. Well, that's not true. 82% of Americans strongly believe even today that The phrase, God helps those who help themselves, is in the Bible. And it's not in the Bible. Christians only fared a little bit better. 81% of Christians believe God helps those who help themselves is in the Bible, and it's not there. So we have a lot of biblical illiteracy out in America, but more importantly in the church. Less than half of Christians can really name 2 to 3 disciples of Jesus Christ. So we have a problem. But the problem is not a new problem. The problem is a very old problem. If you ever have an opportunity, Google Jason E. Norris biblical illiteracy. He does a study to track where it all began, this biblical illiteracy. And he went all the way back towards the founding of this country. Every generation, according to his study, showed that biblical illiteracy was a major problem. And he came up to the conclusion that it all started with the evangelicals. When I read his conclusion, I was kind of stunned. You see, an evangelical is a Greek word where you get the gospel or the good news. So an evangelical is a person, a church, or an organization that is committed to promoting the good news, the gospel of Jesus Christ. And he went on to say when the Puritans came over and the other groups that were being persecuted in Europe, the founding of this country, when they came over, they really connected faith and knowledge. They memorized chapters of the Bible. But somehow when the evangelicals came along, they kind of separated faith from education. It's not that they kind of put down education, but rather it wasn't a top priority for them. So they put all of their emphasis on feelings and emotions. And that's why, according to Jason E. Norris, that's probably why we have a history in our country of biblical illiteracy, which is an interesting point because I'll talk about it in a few months when we talk about church and race. But you wonder why. That's probably why racism and slavery took off during the founding of the country, because they separated education, what the Bible has to say, from their faith. But in any case, why is there today people not willing to get into the Bible? Why are they not interested? Well, one reason, I'll give you 3 reasons, and then I'll introduce some of my friends in a second. But distractions. We are inundated here in America with too many distractions. We have social media, we have texting, we have gaming, we got video games. We got so much stuff that's going on that we are overwhelmed, and the Bible doesn't take a priority. When I grew up, there was only 7 stations on my TV. Now I'm showing my age. It was Channel 2, Channel 4, Channel 5, Channel 7, Channel 9, Channel 11, and then PBS, Channel 13. Pretty much that was it. And after midnight or 1 a.m., all of those stations went off the air. Today, it is amazing. It's thousands of stations that are on the air. And it's 24/7, and we are just inundated. So a few weeks ago, my wife was working late one night, and I said, okay, I'm going to watch a movie. I got so confused. There were so many things I wanted to see. I didn't see anything because there were too many choices. My brain was overloaded. I ended up watching a documentary on Harlem. That's what I ended up watching. But there's so much stuff going on. But what we're discovering in terms of biblical illiteracy, there is too many distractions. Because we are so bent on having fun, there is a famine in the word. That's one reason. Another reason why biblical illiteracy exists has to do with misplaced priority. We are always, and I'm guilty of it myself, we always say God, family, church, exercise and education. That's the priority. And we say that, but too often God is not first. Because the only way God could be first is you got to know him. And one of the reasons you got to know him is through his word. So we have misplaced priorities. Another reason for distractions has to do with overconfidence. Some people just you can't tell them anything. I know everything I need to know about the Bible. There is nothing new that I need to know about the Bible. So there's this air of arrogance or overconfidence. Let me tell you, last fall, I did a personal study for about 2+ weeks on the book of Isaiah. Now, I studied Isaiah before, but I dedicated myself to really understanding Isaiah, and I learned new things about Isaiah that I had never known before in that book. It's 66 chapters, it's long. I spent a couple of weeks and I was blown away. There's always new things to learn, so we can't be overconfident. But I'm going to introduce you to my friends because I think a lot of us suffer from some of the complexes that exist in their lives. Let me get my buddies here. Here they are. Yes, I grew up loving Winnie the Pooh. That's right. That's me. And my kids love Winnie the Pooh. Now, some of us have the Winnie the Pooh complex, right? Winnie the Pooh is not too smart. He's not bright. And therefore, he wouldn't be interested in Bible study because he doesn't think he's smart enough to learn about Bible study. So some of us have that complex. We think we're just not too smart. Another person I love is Piglet. Piglet is a scaredy cat. He is scared of his own shadow. He's always fearful. He's always afraid of everything. So him going to Bible study is like, he couldn't exist in that context because it's like he's too scared. He doesn't want to he leave it to others to teach you what the Bible has to say because he does not handle life very well. Now, I have a third person that's part of the Winnie the Pooh character, but I got an APB out on him. One of my kids stole Rabbit. I can't find Rabbit. I got a reward out here in my house to find Rabbit, but I don't have Rabbit with me. I don't know. One of my kids stole Rabbit. But Rabbit, if you know, he's yellow, he's Rabbit. Rabbit thinks he knows everything. He's so smart that Bible study would be a waste of his time because he's like, I know everything I need to know about it. So Rabbit, some of us have that complex. We just think we know everything about the Bible and we won't get into Bible study. Then you got my man Tigger. Tigger is one of my favorite characters because the way you spell his name is T-I-G-G-E. That's how he spells his name. I'll say it again, T-I-G-G-E. And he's always bouncing around. He can't stay in one place. And a lot of us, when it comes to Bible study, that's how we are. We're bouncing around, distracted, and you gotta chill out, relax. And some of us have the Tigger complex. Others is my man Eeyore. Thanks for noticing. That's how he is. You know, he's boring, low self-esteem. He doesn't think anyone cares for him. He really don't care for anyone. So Bible study would be like, he'll leave it in the hands of others because he's just too boring. And Bible study is just too boring because his life is boring. So some of us are like Eeyore. And then you got Owl. Owl lives in a tree. Owl is smart. He's almost like Rabbit. But the problem with Owl is that Owl is so smart, but he just gets everything wrong. So doing Bible study means, okay, I can get into this, but my conclusions are going to be incorrect. So most of us have this kind of complex where it's one or the other. So today we're going back to basics. I'm going to be doing it today and next Thursday. Again, Vince Lombardi, he would grab a football and he'd stand there in the locker room with the men there and said, "This is a football." And he would go again and reassert the fundamentals. Well, church, this is a Bible. I got plenty of Bibles around here, but this is my personal Bible. This is a Bible. Let's see if we can understand what this Bible has to say for us when we're dealing with back to basics. Now, one thing about the English Bible is that they have 66 books. So if my aunt was here, my Aunt Denise, I would tell her, listen, you got this French Bible? There's 66 books in this Bible. And you just need the right key to unlock it. Now, here's my challenge for you. How many people know the names of all 66 books? I don't know. I'm going to try because my mind works differently than most people. I just know stuff. You know, my wife always said, boy, you just know too much. You know, maybe my brain's going to explode. But I'm going to try to tell you what are the names of the 66 books. And you could hit me up on the chat if I make a mistake. Okay, ready? Let's try. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicle, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus, Philemon, Hebrews, James, 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, Jude, Revelation. 66 books. Backwards. I feel like the Matrix, right? Let's swing backwards, so let's see if I could do this thing backwards. My mind's tripping. Excuse me. I apologize. But let's see if I could do this backwards. Let's see. Let me try. Hit me up if I got it wrong. Revelations, Jude, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st John, 2nd and 1st Peter, James, Hebrews, Philemon, Titus, 2nd and 1st Timothy, 2nd and 1st Thessalonians, and then it's Colossians, Philippians, Ephesians, Galatians, then it's 2nd and 1st Corinthians, then it's Romans, then it's Acts, and it's John, Luke, Mark, Matthew. Whew! Got through the New Testament. Let's see if I can do the math backwards, the Old Testament. Malachi, Zechariah, Haggai, Zephaniah, Habakkuk, Nahum, Micah, Jonah, Obadiah, Amos, Joel, Hosea, Daniel, Ezekiel, Lamentations, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Song of Solomon, Ecclesiastes, Proverbs, Psalms, Job. Then we get to Esther, Nehemiah, Ezra. Then we get to 2nd and 1st Chronicles, 2nd and 1st Kings, 2nd and 1st Samuel. Then I'm in Ruth with Judges and Joshua. Then I'm in Deuteronomy, Numbers, Leviticus, Exodus, Genesis. Ooh, thank you, Jesus. So my mind works like I just know all the names of the Bible because it's important to me. Because anytime I pick up the Bible, I want to know where I am, who am I dealing with, and so forth. So I challenge all of you, memorize the 66 books, but I can break it down even further, which is important. When we talk about back to basics, it's like, okay, we got 66 books. And by the way, I'll have 2 homework assignments at the end, but we got 66 books, 39 in the Old Testament, 27 in the New. So how do we make sense of these books? Well, let's talk about the Old Testament. The best way to understand the 39 books in the Old Testament is to break it down into 3 sections. People break it down differently. This is how I break it down. The historical books, the books of poetry or poetical books, and then the prophetical, the book of the prophets or the prophetical books. So it's historical, poetical, prophetical. That's how the 39 books are broken down. The first 17 books from Genesis all the way to Esther is historical. It's just historical. You just read it and you know it's history. Moses is having an encounter with God and God says, I need you to go back to Egypt and tell the Pharaoh, let my people go. So it's historical stuff. You got David. He says, I'll slay that giant over there. And in the valley of Elah, David goes and slays the mighty giant named Goliath. Then you got Esther, who's married to the king, and God uses her to save the Jewish people. These are historical books. So you got 17 of those. Then you get into poetry or poetical books. The books are different. Job, Psalms, they're written different than the historical stuff. Psalms 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not. Just reading it, you're into poetry. This is a different book. Proverbs 1, talking 1:8, talking about the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Song of Solomon in chapter 1, my beloved is mine and my beloved. These are some poetical books. Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And he talks about the different things that happen in the sun. So those are poetry books, and they're beautiful poetry. And then you get to the prophetical books. That's 17 of those. And they're prophetical books because the name of the book is after a person, number one. And these are people that God has used to confront his people, to confront rebellion, and to get people to turn their hearts back to God. So Isaiah is a guy about Isaiah. Jeremiah is a guy about Jeremiah. So there is some historical stuff and poetry stuff. They're kind of intermingled in certain ways, but primarily it's prophetical books. So you got 17 historical, 5 poetical, 17 prophetical books. I'll break it down just a little bit further in the first 17. Everyone should know that Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, they're called the books of the law. or the books of Moses, or the Torah, or the Pentateuch. Those are historical books, and they're part of that 17, but the first 5 is really Moses is the main author of those books. So, the Old Testament, 39 books, 17 historical, which includes the first 5, which is the books of law, 5 poetical, books of poetry, and then 5 prophetical, the prophets' books. And I should point it out that 12 of the prophets are called minor prophets, and then you got the others who are major. Now, probably why is it they're major prophets and minor prophet? It has nothing to do with size. The minor prophets are not my height, 5'4", but it's just that the length of their books are very short. And then when you read Isaiah and Jeremiah, those books are long. So, 17 historical, 5 poetical, 17 prophetical books. What's the essence of the Old Testament? At the essence of the Old Testament, it begins with creation, and then it tells the story of the Jewish people up to the time of Jesus Christ. That's it. If you can wrap your head around that, that's what the 39 books are all about. It begins with creation, it's telling you about the story of the Jewish people, and up to the point of Jesus Christ. Now, the New Testament is broken down a little bit different. The New Testament, I break it down historical books, and then Pauline letters. It's not a woman, Pauline. Pauline is Paul, the Apostle Paul, and then general letters. There's 5 New Testament historical books: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and the book of Acts. Those are historical books. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are considered the Gospels, and they're telling you the story about Jesus Christ from different vantage points based on their own personal experience being led by the Spirit. They are writing these books, and they're giving you a picture of who Jesus Christ is. Historical stuff. Jesus walking on water, Jesus casting out demons, the demoniac, Jesus healing the sick, raising people from the dead. This is all historical stuff that goes on. And then after the first 5 books, from Romans onwards, we basically have Pauline letters. Paul wrote about 13 letters to churches and to individuals. And then you have general letters: Hebrews, James. The Apostle Peter wrote 2 letters. John the Apostle also wrote 3 more letters after the Gospel of John. And then Revelations. So these are how the New Testament 27 books are broken down. It's 5, 13, and then 11. I'm sorry, 5, 13, and then, let me get my calculation right, 5, 13, 18, and 9. Then you get the general letters. So that's how it's broken down. Now, the New Testament, the main point of the New Testament is simple. The New Testament is the story about Jesus of Nazareth and his church and the growth of the church that occurred under the leadership of the apostles. That is basically the essence of the New Testament. It's the story of Jesus of Nazareth, the founding of his church, and the growth of that church by the apostles after. It doesn't happen before, but it only happens after the death, burial, and resurrection of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So that's it. 39 Old Testament, 27 New Testament books. That gives you the combo of 66. Now, for those of you who likes trivia question, I have a question for you. You can hit me up on the chat. Here's the question. In the Jewish Bible, there's only 24 books, but in the English Bible, there's only 39 books. But all 39 are in the 24 books. How's that possible? I'll say it again. In the Jewish Bible, there's 24 books. In the English Old Testament, in the English Old Testament, there's 39. But not one book is missing in the 24. How's that possible? Anyone who has that answer, hit me up. You can do it. So I'm gonna tell you about that. It is. I'll give you the answer in a second. But that's the essence of the Bible and the New Testament. Let me talk to you about the benefits of Bible study. Why should you benefit from studying God's Word? Very simple. It's essential for growth. That's one reason. It's essential for spiritual growth. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 2 says, just like newborn babies crave for milk, we crave for the pure milk of the word so that it can help us grow. So studying the Bible helps us to spiritually grow. That's one reason that we have to get into Bible study. The other reason we have to get into Bible study has to do with it's essential for spiritual maturity. Now, I don't know who wrote the book of Hebrews. A lot of people have questions, and that's another question for some of you. Some people think a woman wrote Hebrews. Why would that be possible? Anyway, let me not go there. But we really don't have an author's name in the book of Hebrews. But in Hebrews chapter 5, he talks about verse 11. Paul was kind of disappointed with the people. I'm not Paul, the writer, the author of Hebrews was disappointed with the people. He says, listen, some of you should be teachers by now, but you still need a teacher to teach you the elementary principles of the oracles of God. And you're still eating or drinking milk when you should be having solid food. Hebrews 5, 11 to 14, I'm paraphrasing it. Paul was like, Bible studies is essential to spiritual maturity because you got to get off of milk and you got to get into solid foods. You got to have people stop teaching you, and now you need to teach others. So that's Hebrews chapter 5, verse 11 and 14. And then the other reason that Bible study is effective is essential for spiritual effectiveness. 2 Timothy 3, 16 and 17. All scriptures inspired by God is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, correction, for the path of righteousness to help you be effective in righteousness. So my challenge to all of you is you have to learn this Bible. You got to learn. I may run into some of you in church and I'm going to say, you know all 66 books of the Bible. But yeah, Paul tells us in Timothy, when he's writing to Timothy, he says, listen, all of this is inspired by God. And we'll talk another topic about inspiration and revelation. But it's profitable for doctrine. You see, what you believe is going to affect your behavior. So the more you study doctrine or teachings of the church or teachings from the Bible, it's going to affect your behavior. But he says it's also profitable for correction. That means it lets you know what the boundaries are, when you're out of bounds or when you're within the boundaries. So it corrects your behavior, it corrects your thinking, it corrects your action. I had a friend I had known for many years, and he ended up divorcing his wife, and I was shocked. And I spent over 2 hours on the phone with him, and he was justifying to me, not his own sin, because he messed up. He did know that he messed up. But he was trying to make a biblical case to me why his wife doesn't have the biblical right to divorce him. Only he could divorce her. And I'm listening to this. I'm like, okay, all right. So his teaching is wrong, and he needs some correction. He's out of bounds. But it's profitable for rebuke, for teaching, reproof, and it's profitable to each of us so that we can be effective in the ministry that God has called us to. What are you interested in? Are you interested in spiritual maturity? Are you interested in spiritual growth? Are you interested in being spiritually effective? Look at those three scriptures: 1 Peter 2:2, Hebrews 5:11 and 14, 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17. Now, what makes the Bible so popular? To this day, the Bible is still the #1 best-selling book in all the world. It is. There's more copies of the Bible. They keep printing more copies of the Bible like crazy. Some people think it's popular because it has great historical significance. That's true. Some people think it's popular because it has some great stories, and it sure does have some great stories. That's why I fell in love with the Old Testament more than any. If I ever could learn that Hebrew language, I would have probably been an Old Testament scholar, but the Hebrew language was killing me in seminary. But I love the Old Testament. It has some great stories. Some think the Bible is great because of biblical prophecy. It has some great prophetical significance. Others think that the Bible is just like any other holy book, like the Book of Mormon. Well, we'll talk about that stuff when we get into the cults. So, the Book of the Law, the Pentateuch, which is the 5 books, is counted as one book. Dillis, you're almost there. You're almost there. I'm going to edge you along. I see you in my chat. It. She's trying to answer the question I raised. How is it that there's 39 books in the Old Testament in the English version, but there's only 24 in the old Jewish Bible, yet not one of the 39 is missing in the 24? She's almost, you're almost there. I see where you're going. Keep at it. Keep at it. But yeah, so other people love the Bible because they just think it's a great book on prophecy, a great holy book. That's what I was saying. A great holy book, like, the Bhagavad Gita, which is a Hindu sacred book, or the Book of Mormons, which they consider, very holy, or the Holy Quran. Yeah, that's possible. But the truth is, it's all of these, but much more. The Holy Bible is God's revelation to us as it relates to humanity. It talks about our beginnings, it talks about where we are today, and it gives us a picture of where we're going in the future. No other book can do that. We are totally, we'll talk about this probably next week, actually, or in 2 weeks. But basically, what happens in the garden put us in a state of depravity. We could not save ourselves. So God in his mercy and God in his grace revealed himself to us. So it's God's revelation to humankind. And we have to understand that revelation. Anybody else got it? No, they still working on it. So anyway, Revelation, there's no other book like it. None. And that's why I love the Bible so much, because it makes sense once you understand the key that unlocks it. And it's really God's revelation to each and every one of us. I don't know about you, but I love the fact that I know how it all started. I know where I am today, and I know where the future is going. And therefore, the Bible answers all of that. There's something else about the Bible that's much more important. Not only is it revelation, but more importantly, God unmasked himself to us. He pulls off the veil so that we could see his love, his goodness to each and every one of us. That you can't get in a lot of the other quote unquote holy books. So that's why I love the Bible. Now, no one came up with that answer yet. All right, I'll ask that question one more time. Ready? The English Old Testament Bible has 39 books, from Genesis all the way to Malachi. All 39 books are contained in the 24 books in the Jewish Old Testament, or the Jewish Bible. How is that possible? Keep at it. I have another question for you. Ready? Actually, I'm going to read it. It's Matthew chapter 23, verse 28. Most of us know that Jesus is Jewish. He grew up Jewish. He grew up in a Jewish home. Jesus didn't even stray past Israel. He didn't go a lot of places. His whole ministry was from Jerusalem in the south all the way to the Sea of Galilee in the north. Pretty much that's where Jesus contained his ministry. So Jesus is having an issue with the Pharisees, the leaders, Sadducees, the leaders of the synagogues. And Jesus gives 7 woes to the leaders. And in Matthew chapter 23, verse 35, Jesus is so upset with these Jewish leaders. He says, "And so upon you will come all the righteous blood that has been shed on earth, from the blood of the righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar." Jesus is saying their blood, those prophets, those men of God, are going to be upon you, this generation he's talking to at the time. But the interesting thing about it is, Jesus is actually mentioning all of the prophets from Abel. Abel, by the way, is in the book of Genesis. And then he mentions all the way to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah. So here's the question. This is a trivia question. Jesus is mentioning all 24 books in a way. He's starting with Genesis, and he's ending up at the end of the Jewish Bible, and he says all of those prophets that died from Abel all the way to Zechariah, son of Berechiah, encompasses all 24 of the Jewish Old Testament. How is that possible? That's the question. Anybody have it? Let's see. Oh, Nisha. Okay, Nisha says, does the Jewish Bible take out the minor prophets? Nope, the minor prophets are there, Nisha, just to let you know. But your second question, Nisha, you hit it. She's getting there, everybody. There's 12 minor prophets in the Jewish Bible. That's all one book. So, Nisha, you're on the right path. The minor prophets, the 12 books, are actually one book. So now subtract 11 from the 39 and you're at 28. What's going on with the other 4 books that need to be taken out? Let's see. Yes, Fritz. I believe some of the books consider as one. You're right. 1st and 2nd Samuel is one book. 1st and 2nd Kings is one book. And 1st and 2nd Chronicle is one book. You're close. You're almost there at the 24. So you just condensed the 12 books of the prophets into one. You took out 3 books by combining Kings, Chronicles, and Samuel. You're almost there. You're almost at 24. There's one more that you got to remember. But who got the second question? Jesus is quoting all 24 books when he says the blood of Abel all the way to Zechariah is going to be on that generation, their blood. And hopefully you'll figure that one. That's a tricky one. Maybe most of you won't. But anyway, housekeeping matters. I have a few more minutes and then I'll take any questions as it relates to the Bible. I should point out that the Catholic Church included what's often referred to as the Apocrypha books. These are like hidden books, hidden that they were divine, but hidden in the sense of most church people don't consider it inspired by God, but yet they included it. They have some historical value, the Apocryphal books, anywhere from 8 to 13 or whatever number you choose. But really, it's 39 and 27 in the English Bible, and keep that in mind. Dillis. Well, we're talking about the Old Testament, Dillis. The 39 books in the Old Testament is contained in the Jewish Bible's 24 books. So someone got it right in the sense of Kings, Chronicles, and Samuel's all one book, and the 12 minor prophets are one book. There's one more that you're almost there. Okay? So, no one even touched the one Abel to the blood of Zechariah. Okay, I'll give you that answer. Housekeeping matters. If you like what we're going to start here for the next few matters, please subscribe to this channel. Please subscribe. Hit the subscribe button because I need that. That tells me maybe I'm doing okay. If there's only one subscription, I may be out of business next week. But who knows? I'm going to be talking about some heavy stuff in the next few weeks. I might be canceled off of YouTube. I may have to go somewhere else. Who knows what's going on? But because of our cancel culture, and we will talk about that coming up as well. So keep that in mind. Also, housekeeping matter, I do want to thank my man Sam Jerome. He's my tech guru. None of this would be possible without Sam. Sam told me what I needed. I needed a computer. I needed video camera. I needed a bunch of stuff. He hooked me up, and I appreciate Sam. Those are people who are at Ebenezer Christian and Missionary Alliance Church in Newark. Sam Jerome's the man, one of the trustees there, and he's doing a phenomenal job. If he didn't show up tonight, there would be no broadcast. Let me put it that way. All right. Let's see. Dillis. Ooh, I like Dillis. Dillis trying to get this thing. Anyway, anyone else have any questions regarding the basics of the Bible? 39 Old Testament, 27 New Testament. The Old Testament begins with creation and tells the story of the Jewish people up to Jesus Christ. The New Testament is 27 books. It's about Jesus of Nazareth, the church he founded, and the growth of that church under his apostleship, under the apostles after his death, burial, and resurrection. So, any questions regarding the Bible? I guess I'm going to have to answer this question. People are close. So let me give a shout out to Nisha. Yes, the 12 minor prophets are one book. And yes, Kings, Chronicles, and Samuel are all one book. Ezra and Nehemiah is considered one book. So I think if you start subtracting, you'll get close to 24 or at 24. So now the question about anyone tried Matthew chapter 28, that Jesus is talking about the prophets, that their blood has been spilled from Abel to Zechariah, but yet in essence Jesus is talking about the 24 books of the Jewish Bible. Anyone? Okay, I'm opening it up to any other questions that you might have. Think. And please subscribe. That's how I know I can keep on going, okay? All right. Any other questions that you might have? Then let me answer this question for you. When Jesus writes in Matthew chapter 23, verse 35, he says, "And upon you will come all the righteous blood that has been shed on earth, from the blood of the righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar." He goes on to say, I'm reading the next verse 36, "I tell you the truth, all this will come upon this generation." Jesus is condemning the Jewish leadership. It says, you guys have been murdering the prophets all the way from Abel to Zechariah. Indirectly, Jesus, being Jewish, he understood that there was 24 books in the Old Testament. And the reason I know he knows that there's 24 books, because we all know Cain killed his brother Abel in the book of Genesis, which is the first book. But this Zechariah, son of Berechiah, gets killed in the book of Chronicles. Now, how do I know Jesus knows all 24 books? Because in the Jewish Bible, the Jewish Bible does not end in the book of Malachi. We in our English Bible, Malachi is the last book in the Old Testament. In the Jewish Bible, the last book is Chronicles. So Jesus is covering Genesis all the way to Chronicles, all 24 books. He says from Abel all the way to Zechariah, who died in Chronicles, that blood, the whole Old Testament, all of those prophets you killed is going to come on that generation. So that was a trick question, and I apologize. I had to throw that in there. But Chronicle is really the last book in the Jewish Bible. So Jesus is remembering Genesis all the way to Chronicles. The same we say Genesis to Revelation, that encompasses everything. Jesus is basically saying Genesis, all of the prophets of Genesis to Chronicles is going to be on your head. All right. Any other questions? Anyone? So next week, I am going to meet here at the same time. And we're going to continue. We're going to talk about something very important, because over the years, a lot of people have confronted me. It's like, well, mankind wrote the book. Men wrote the book. Men decided which book was in the Bible and which is not in the Bible, is not inspired or anything like that. So we'll talk about those questions. And who wrote Deuteronomy? Good question. Well, I think Moses wrote most of Deuteronomy, but Moses could not write his death, so Joshua probably added that chapter to the end of Deuteronomy, where Moses dies, and then Joshua continues and writes his story as well. So that's what I would say. And for Jews, specifically the Jews, it always has been common knowledge that Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy is the books of Moses, the books of the law, the Torah. So yes, I would say that Moses was the contributing writer of Deuteronomy up to his point of death, and then you could say an editorial note was put in at the end of the book talking about his death. Any other questions? That was Rolly, yes. All right. So next week, we're going to talk about the canon. We're going to talk about revelation versus inspiration, and we're going to talk about some of the other books in the New Testament in a little detail. But more importantly, let's have a real conversation about Jesus of Nazareth. So we're going to try to touch upon all of that next week as well. Any other questions? Time is running out. I have a few more minutes. Again, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you can always send me a question through my Gmail account. Again, Dr. It's all small caps, dr.jeancadet.virtualbs@gmail.com. What about John's Gospel? The question is asked. Well, it's commonly known in the history of the church that the Apostle John wrote 4 books, and John wrote his book, and his book is completely different than the first 3 books, which is often, you don't need to know this technical term, but Matthew, Mark, and Luke are considered the synoptic gospels. There are so many similarities between the 3 gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, that they think that, they probably got witnesses from each story and wrote the same story. There's very similar writings in all 3 books, but John is completely different. John is kind of writing from a personal experience, and John was one of Jesus' favorite disciples. And so I think in the history of the church, it's always been known that John wrote that book. Outside of Paul wrote 13 books in the New Testament. John wrote 5. He wrote the Gospel of John. He wrote 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and he wrote the book of Revelation. So John has a lot of books. And the writings of all 5 books are very similar grammatically. Any other questions? Okay, so next time I'm going to hit up some of these people since you've exposed yourself, some of you. Let's see. Nagy, yeah. Dillis, yeah. Nisha, yes. Fritz, yeah. I'm going to hit you up next week. I'm going to call you out and say, give me the names of all 66 books in the Bible. And don't miss a beat. Just kidding. I won't do that. So if there are no other questions, tonight was just back to basics, part 1. Next week we'll get into more details, and I hope you would join me. Again, please subscribe to the channel and hit me up on my email if you have any questions. I can take it offline and answer those questions. dr.jeancadet.virtualbs@gmail.com. And again, special thanks to Sam for getting me all this stuff up and running. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank all of you for joining me. And again, this was dedicated to my aunt Denise, and I know this would have helped her to understand that even though she had been in all of her life in church and didn't know a thing about the Bible. So I hope I was helpful. God bless you. Let me pray. Father, in the name of Jesus, I thank you for all of those who are online. I pray that each and every one of them have been blessed, and that they will continue to stay with us and as we cover some serious topics going forward. But in the meantime, in the words of Vince Lombardi, it's like, this is a football. Let's get back to basics. So I'm hoping to get back to basics so that we can understand key significant revelation that you have for us. So bless everyone this evening. God bless them in Jesus Christ's holy name. Amen. See you next week, 7 o'clock. And my goal is only to be here 1 hour. Today we did 52 minutes. Not bad. God bless you. And you could always go back to the YouTube channel and listen back to the recording. Take care.